What's going on, everyone? How's it going? Welcome to today's market analysis and trade recap episode. Today is Monday, July the 21st, and we were able to take two trades today, one decent sized winner and one small loser. And let's take a look at the things that made me take these two trades and also take a look into the overall conditions and essentially analyze the market session from 8:30 a.m. Central Time to 10:30 a.m. Central Time completely during today's episode and see if there were any opportunities we missed out on, see what we may have done better in our trades or could have done better in our trades, and see if there was any way to continue system refinement and more. So let's dive straight into this, and I do want to start out with overviewing the news. So today we did not really have any news we had to worry about. But as you'll see, this fear and greed index release did seem to affect the markets potentially, which may or may not be a reason for the factors that occurred today. But we'll dive into that later as well. But let's get back to here. Coming prior to market open, what we saw occurring is we started tapping into this 4-hour zone, and that's what occurred on ES, and on NQ, on top of that, we swept main liquidity. Now, this is just technical analysis. It's just something to build my sentiment or bias base off of, but that's simply what I noticed. And that's all. And since we saw such a strong reaction upon market open, that truly built the sentiment that the direction early in the market will likely be towards the long side, and our job is to simply ride and follow the flow of capital that is occurring. And honestly, that's exactly what we did. Here are all the levels. If you're wondering, Bookmap levels are simply marked from all of these levels, significant levels on Bookmap, and targets, not barriers. But we marked out all those Bookmap liquidity levels, and right as we started seeing us break above this area around 8:45, oops, right as we started breaking above this area at 8:45, we were easily brought into a long bias and we're essentially trying to continue that wave like I mentioned. And same thing on NQ. And you can see that the price action from market open to around 8:45 or 9:30ish was really good in terms of carrying that long momentum, and even better on ES today. But let's go ahead and start undergoing our market analysis, and I'll guide you through everything of that nature as well. Let's get straight into it. So let's start out with market open, which let me go back to 3 hour, 3 minute. Right here is our market open. And let's just skip through this initial part as we'll get into our trades very soon. Right now we're revolving around that initial market open liquidity, right? So we want to see two things. Can we break out of this level? Will we see absorption and a sell-off from this level? Or essentially, how will we react at this level? And where is price showing us that it wants to head towards? If we break these passive sellers, it shows it shows a big signal of buyer aggression and active buyer aggression, which can continue the market upwards if we see plausible continuation entry models. As you see, we're still stalling, but soon enough, we do happen to go ahead and wait for it. We do happen to break through and start heading towards the upside. Now, I do think I might have tried to find an entry here as well. And this actually looks very similar to the trade I took later on, but maybe there. was a trade. No, there's not. But that doesn't look like it either. 740. Maybe could have been a retracement play here, targeting these upper 6358 area. So let's just say we do enter, and that would be on the 35 candle. Oh wow, that would be much better entry. Seeing a reaction here, 6350.75. 6350.75 right there. Stop loss under around 4.5. Gonna be pretty wide stop loss, but our target is gonna be clearly at 6358-ish area. So yeah, this definitely could have been a plausible trade, and I do see it play out as expected with low drawdown. So maybe we potentially missed out on this, but I do like waiting 15 minutes after, so we're not going to consider that. But for those who do want to get in that earlier part of the day, we saw a setup occur, Bookmap ride, and it would have played out nicely as well. But I'm not going to consider it simply because I wouldn't particularly say direction is found quite yet, simply because we still are at this breakout level and we do need to see significant breakout in order for us to identify that momentum. And soon enough, we do happen to see exactly that. Let me continue moving forward. As you see, we continue to do such. We went from down there up to here. Now, this is the point where I have gotten my entry very, very soon, right? And let me tell you why. Oh, actually, this was the point where I got my entry. Let me tell you exactly why. First of all, we've broken out of the initial market open breakout range. Second, we've taken this Bookmap liquidity, right? And buyers are still showing interest. Now, I'm not particularly sure if I'll enter long or short at this point prior, and the reason for that is we're essentially gravitating between these two passive participants, but now all the significant passive participants seem to be buyers, and as you'll notice here, in the previous area where we saw high amounts of volume, in this initial liquidity area right there, what we saw was that passive buyers started loading up at that area, right at this volume area, and we started seeing seller absorption. Although it's hard to notice here, when the candle was actually forming and when the when the footprint candle was actually creating itself, you could see a lot of aggressive sellers trying to get in here at the bottom that were unable to do so. And you see there was volume conducted here at this high volume node in the previous candle. And we did see absorption. You can see sellers try to get in. Sellers try to get in, but they're unable to push through and they're not showing too much interest to push through. But buyers are reacting off of it. With that buyer activity identification, we can enter the trade simply because we have identified the direction because of a flip of liquidity with viable targets above here at this 6365 area. I wouldn't really consider this 6362 area simply because it's not as significant the upper one, and also, and yeah, that's gonna be essentially it. This is also more recent liquidity, while the top one is more extended long-term liquidity, which typically tends to matter a lot more. So we simply entered in, and let me tell you where we entered. Let's go back and talk about that, right? We came down here, started seeing seller absorption. You can see that occur. Sellers are unable to break through a big chunk of that passive liquidity. We start popping up, right? And let me see where I entered. I think I entered potentially a bit late on this one. 58.75. So right around here was when I actually entered. Right here. So we didn't have a late entry on the first trade. We entered right off of that initial buying reaction. And we simply decided to ride the wave along. And that was exactly what happened. Although we did have this quick jump scare with these passive sellers that suddenly came up into us, these buyers came in aggressively. They weren't getting absorbed per se, and they showed a bounce towards the upside here at this 850 candle, and in the 855 candle we're seeing continued buyer strength. Simply because of the price action of this candle, we were able to enter this trade despite passive sellers appearing in the trade before that push up. But we essentially see these buyers coming in and push up to our take profit level, marking the first trade as a W, catching around 24 ticks in a 1.6 risk to reward. Now let's continue going. Now it's hard to tell, but here it does seem to be showing liquidity flipping signals, but nothing too significant because if you look at the distribution of liquidity, significance would be found at this 6350 area, this 6355 area, and this 6360 area. Where we're at right now, that's just typical liquidity. I wouldn't consider that significant. But yeah, we're watching to see if we can get further signals. And 57, looking in hindsight, it does look like we saw seller absorption here. You can see large sellers coming in, unable to break below. We see buying push up. This 6370 area is significant, as well as that 6374 area. So we're essentially seeing how we can head up to these 6370 areas, and we don't actually touch it upon the first touch. We don't even test it. But I do find the entry trying to head for a test for the longs. Two reasons. In prior, we had a high volume node here where we potentially saw seller absorption, so I extended that relative zone area. We came back down to that area, as you'll soon notice. There, we saw that big spike of sellers occur, creating decent seller activity there. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know about the actual validity as to if I should have entered this trade. 635.75, so right at this top wick. But we started seeing decent sellers coming in the bottom of this candle in real time, and we potentially noted that down as absorption right around this area when we start to see that reaction, and I'll tell you exactly when. Came in, we entered a bit late on this one for sure, I'm pretty sure. We start testing that lower liquidity area and we see a sudden and aggressive surge of buyers. And realistically, upon noticing that, we realistically should have been able to enter around 6364.25, which is 2 ticks below. Wait, what am I saying? Which would have been where we took our stop loss. So technically, it would have put us break even on this trade. But yeah, that means if we entered where we're supposed to without hesitating, we wouldn't have taken a 5 tick loss like we did. And we started seeing that aggression coming in, and that's valid. I'm not gonna lie. We saw this area carry over here. We started seeing seller absorption here, followed by a buyer reaction. And now we're, and this is aggressive buying too. This is not minimal buying. This is pretty aggressive buying. We entered in. Now we are simply waiting to see how buyers can continue up to that 6370 area. And where did we exit? We exited as buyers were stalling at that relative area. We had large amounts of buying there, unable to push through. And what we saw was that passive selling did happen to move down. We saw the movement from there down to here. And what that tells to me is that it might have been seller aggression occurring, in which we may want to exit. But looking in hindsight, I don't know if we actually should have exited there. And the reason being is This is not significant passive liquidity for us to worry about. It's simply just a visual on Bookmap. We should worry about the significance of that level before considering if we should exit due to invalidation. Right now, for the time being, I'm not really seeing any invalidation. And I wouldn't consider maybe invalidation, but I wouldn't really count on that as well. Because this is 145 barrier, these are only one. Yeah, I mean, it could count as invalidation. This, I would say, is a coin flip in terms of counting this as invalidation. If we did not count it as invalidation, we would have taken a break even if we entered where we were supposed to. Or if we did not consider it as invalidation and held, we would have hit or take profit. So, I mean, there's two ways to look about it, but it's always better to be more safe than sorry. And since we are seeing these three areas of passive selling, I mean, we are seeing hundreds. We are seeing a decent amount. Nothing is particularly highlighting these specifically, right? So I'm not gonna say it's invalidation for this purpose. We come back down towards that area, towards our entry or stop loss relative area. And keep in mind, our OG stop loss was at 362.25, which happened to be a slower barrier area. And we did not want to come back into there at all. And we got very, very close, I'm not gonna lie. Very close. And then we came down to the area, bars started popping in again. But here, uh, it's hard to really tell. You do see almost 130 passive sellers there right as buyers started aggressing. But then those buyers removed themselves and we started seeing a big splurge of buyers come in. Now, this is what I want to explain. Why did this big splurge of buying come in? Well, we had our fear and greed index get released right at the same time, so I believe that could have been a reason that we spiked up like such. And with that spike up, it would have led into our take profit, which would have resulted in a decent 1.31 risk to reward trade with 17 tick take profit. Nothing to complain about at all, but unfortunately, we took a 5 tick loss simply because we did not want to mess around with these passive sellers, when in reality, it would have been better to simply hold as we're playing with our plan from what I'm seeing. But honestly, this would be a 50-50. I would say it needs more test. I would say it needs more testing to actually determine if those stacked insignificant barriers actually produce a measurable impact against actual significant size barriers, which I would determine in this market as over 130 plus and 200 even more significant, 140 significant, 166 significant, 146 significant. You see all these different levels, and those are typically levels where you expect to make a directional shift or a continuation. And here, every time we went down to that level, we started seeing a directional shift back towards the upside, which also works as continuation. So I'm gonna say that what we did today is not necessarily a bad thing, as we were trying to manage our risk. But if we simply considered this that it was not a sign of invalidation, then we likely could have stayed in the trade, holding until our full stop loss, trying to complete our full target, seeing, but also keep in mind that we could have never predicted this news. We could have never predicted that aggressive splurge of buyers that were to suddenly come in due to news. So honestly, I'm gonna put this in my back of my head now and come back to it later. But one thing I can take away from this is to use the barriers that we see here, validate them, and use them within context of the market. They need to be significant for us to actually work with them. As you see, goes to our take profit. Let's keep going. Remember, it's only 10:23 Eastern time, and we've already made two trades. That's only in the first half. But yeah, let's keep going. Now, there was one other place where we were deciding that we may want to take a trade around almost 10 a.m., right? Because after we saw that sweep of liquidity from that sudden spurge of buyers from that absorption, we started making a small leg down in which we started testing this level, which did happen to go away. Let me see. I don't remember it fully. We have this 6366 area. And nothing really you can do there. There's nothing you can play with or see absorption with, etc. Just see selling occur. And potentially buyer absorption here at the top as well. You can see that. Oh wow, it's already 9:50, so we just went through 30 minutes of time, where as you can see on the footprint chart, where we saw low volume and simply a move down. And also, guys, if you just use these chart patterns, it will not work, but this does represent a small type of bull flag, and that's validated through the volume distribution. While we were up on our up move, average volume was around 12 plus K. Now when we're on our down move, average volume is around 8K. Less volume when the sellers occur, more volume when the buyers occur, indicating more aggressive buyers in the current market, but nothing really to validate. But now, as you can see, what I'm noticing here is that this 6364 area is starting to hold, and we may potentially want to take a trade off of such. And what was that moment where I wanted to enter 50? So upon there. Honestly, I would not see entry there simply because I don't see viable absorption. I don't really know why I marked it out. But yeah, there was no absorption there significant for us to take an entry down at this area. But down at the area when we did test that level was when we saw slow but sure buying movement up to our take profit. And as I skipped through all of that, there was no setups that could have been found. Yeah, there's literally no setups to be found. Just skipping through it, but I don't see anything that we could have taken. And then by then, market session is over as it's now 11:30 Eastern Time and 10:30 Central Time. And as you can see overall, look how important Bookmap liquidity levels are in actually predicting price. We're at the all-time high region, and there's no levels to work with above us, right? Bookmap comes in and fills in that gap with these Bookmap levels. These Bookmap levels literally top ticked the exact top where price was to reverse and make a sell-off once again. And now we are back down to this 4-hour area where we have to see how we react for tomorrow. But honestly, that is going to be all I have here for today. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below or join the free Discord server. The link is in the description down below, and there are many resources I highly believe you can take advantage of. Additionally, if you want to take advantage of free bookmap and footprint tools like such, take a look in the links in the description as well. Addis Charts is the official channel partner, and honestly, it's one of the best and most user-friendly order flow tools that I've seen out there. And you can start integrating into your strategy for completely free. Even the free plan comes with lots of functionality, and highly recommend you guys to check it out, but do your own research as always. Other than that, that's all I have here for today. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning for a pre-market analysis and later tomorrow for the market analysis. But other than that, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.